She helped an old man every day, until his grandson walked in with lawyers and changed everything. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The morning sun barely touched the sleepy town when Lena crossed the quiet street, balancing a tray of oatmeal and black coffee in her hands. The air smelled faintly of pine and cold iron, the kind that made your breath visible. Every day for the past 6 months, she had walked this same route to the worn-down yellow house at the corner of Willow Street, where Mr. Arthur lived alone. He was 83, sharp eyes dimmed by time, and legs that didn't carry him far anymore. The neighbors had long stopped visiting, but Lena never missed a morning. "Good morning, Mr. Arthur," she called softly as she pushed the creaky gate open. He was by the window, a blanket around his shoulders, the same wool one she had mended last week. "You again," he grumbled, but his lips twitched, almost smiling. "You should be working, young lady." "I do," she said, setting the tray on the small table near his armchair. "Just not when my favorite breakfast critic is hungry." His laugh was a dry cough, but there was warmth in it. He reached for the mug, hands trembling. She steadied it without a word. The room smelled of dust and old books. Sunlight spilling across the faded photos on the mantel, one of a young man in uniform, another of a family she didn't know. Every morning she noticed them, and every morning she wanted to ask, but never did. "You remind me of my son's wife," Arthur murmured. "Kind eyes, too kind." Lena smiled faintly. "Then I hope she was good to you." He looked away. She was, until money made her forget what mattered. She didn't know what to say to that. Instead, she tucked the blanket tighter around him, her fingers brushing the edge of the scarf she'd knitted last winter. "You should wear this more often. It suits you," he chuckled. "You talk too much, only because you don't talk enough." Outside, a breeze carried the smell of rain. She glanced at her watch. It was almost time for her shift at the care center across town, but something made her linger. Maybe it was the way he watched the window, as if expecting someone who never came. "Do you want me to read to you later?" she asked. "That book you like, about the red fishing boat?" He nodded absently. "If I'm still here, don't joke like that." He smiled faintly. "Who said I was joking?" She exhaled, forcing a smile, picking up the empty bowl. "I'll come back after work, okay?" He didn't answer, just looked out at the rust-colored leaves swirling down the sidewalk. As she closed the gate behind her, she didn't notice the dark sedan parked 2 houses down, or the man inside scrolling through documents with the name Arthur Carter stamped across the top. For Lena, it was just another ordinary morning of kindness. She had no idea that within days, her world and his would never be the same. By the time the afternoon rolled in, gray clouds had gathered over Willow Street, and the smell of rain hinted at another long evening. Lena wiped her hands on her apron as she clocked out from the care center, her legs aching after a double shift. The old bus rattled through town, drops of rain splattering against the window. She stared out, thinking about Mr. Arthur. He had seemed more tired than usual that morning, more lost in thought. Maybe she would stop by again just to check on him. By the time she reached his house, the rain had started. She pulled her hoodie tight, carrying a small bag of groceries and a fresh loaf of bread. The porch light was off. She hesitated, then knocked. No answer. She knocked again, louder this time. The door creaked open by itself, unlocked. "Mr. Arthur?" she called. Silence. The ticking clock filled the room, slow and steady. Then she saw him slumped slightly in his armchair, head tilted to one side, breathing shallow but steady. Relief washed over her. "You scared me," she whispered, kneeling beside him. He opened one eye halfway. "You came back." "Of course I did," she said softly. "You did not finish your soup." He smiled faintly. "You sound like my wife when she was still around." Then she must have had good taste. She adjusted the blanket over him, noticing the unopened envelope still stacked on the table. He followed her gaze. "Do not bother with those," he murmured. "Just paper. Paper that thinks it can replace people." She nodded, not pushing further. Outside, thunder rumbled, and the rain grew heavier. She set the bread on the counter and filled the kettle, the simple rhythm of care that had become their language. "Lena," he said after a while, voice thin, "do you ever feel like life owes you more than it gave?" She smiled sadly. Sometimes. But then I remember how much worse it could be. You are too young to sound that wise, he murmured. Maybe I am just tired enough to be honest, she said. He laughed weakly, and for a moment the room felt lighter. When the kettle whistled, she poured him tea, adding a single spoon of honey the way he liked. He sipped it, closing his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. You make the house feel less empty. She sat across from him, hands around her own cup. You make this town feel less lonely, she said. A small smile tugged at his lips. The sound of rain filled the pauses between them. After a long while, he dozed off, and she covered him with the blanket once more. She glanced again at the envelopes. One of them had a logo embossed in gold Carter Holdings, same as before. She frowned, curiosity biting at her. On impulse, she slipped it open carefully. Inside was a formal letter notice of estate review, property transfer, and legal representation by Carter and Lewis. She did not understand all of it, but one line stood out. Pending guardianship and control of assets under Ethan Carter. She froze. Ethan Carter. The name felt heavy, familiar from the news. A corporate heir, known for ruthless takeovers and scandalous boardroom wars. Why would someone like that have anything to do with Mr. Arthur? She put the letter back where she found it just as a pair of headlights flashed through the rain. The low hum of an expensive engine stopped outside the gate. Her stomach tightened. Through the window she saw a sleek black sedan, the same one she had ignored that morning. The driver's door opened. A man stepped out, tall, sharply dressed in a dark coat, an umbrella in one hand, eyes scanning the porch with practiced authority. Another man followed, holding a briefcase. Lawyers. Lena's heart thudded. She turned toward Mr. Arthur, who had stirred awake, confused by the noise. It is nothing, she whispered. But even as she said it, the knock on the door came firm, measured, final. She took a deep breath and opened it. Rain splashed over her shoes as the man under the umbrella met her eyes. Good evening, he said evenly. I am looking for Arthur Carter. He is resting, Lena replied, standing her ground. May I ask who you are? The man's gaze hardened slightly. Ethan Carter, his grandson, and I believe we need to talk. The sound of thunder cracked behind him like punctuation to a sentence that would change everything. Lena stood frozen for a heartbeat, the rain whispering behind Ethan's shoulders like a warning. He did not wait for her to speak again. We will not take long, he said curtly, stepping past her with the quiet confidence of someone used to owning every room he entered. His lawyers followed, dripping umbrellas and polished shoes on the old wooden floor. Mr. Arthur stirred in his chair, blinking at the sight of strangers in suits. Who are you? He asked, voice trembling. Ethan took a slow breath, his expression tightening just slightly before softening. It is me, grandfather. Ethan. The old man blinked again, confusion flickering across his face before it settled into something like recognition. Ethan, I thought you were in New York. I was, Ethan replied, glancing at the papers in his hand. But I am here now. You should not be living like this. His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on the chipped walls and the single lamp that hummed faintly in the corner. You have everything you need, and yet you are. Here, his tone made the words sound like a curse. Lena's jaw clenched. He is fine here, she said quietly. He is happy. Ethan turned to her, eyes sharp. And you are, Lena? She replied, her voice steady despite the tremor in her chest. I help Mr. Arthur with meals and errands. He has been alone since his fall. So, you are his nurse? Not officially, she said. I just help. One of the lawyers cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, we should go over the documents before. Not now, Ethan interrupted. He was still looking at Lena, as if trying to read the space between her words. You help him every day? For how long? 6 months, she said. Why? Because nobody else did, she added before he could speak again. Not the neighbors, not the family he still hoped would visit. Ethan's eyes flickered, but his face remained unreadable. You think I do not care, he said quietly. I do not think that, she replied. I just think caring looks different when it costs you nothing. For the first time, his composure cracked. You have no idea what you are talking about. Maybe, she said softly. But I know what loneliness looks like. Mr. Arthur raised a trembling hand. Enough, he said, his voice thin but firm. Ethan, you came all this way. Sit down. Have some tea. Ethan hesitated, then gave a clipped nod and Saturday. The silence that followed was thick with unspoken years. The kettle still sat warm on the stove. Lena poured 3 cups without being asked. She placed one before Ethan, who stared at it like it was a foreign object. "He likes it with honey," she said quietly. "He taught me that." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a shadow of memory crossing his features. He took a sip, grimaced slightly, then said, "It tastes the same. He used to make it for me when I was little." Mr. Arthur smiled faintly. "You remember." "I remember you leaving," Ethan replied, his tone colder now. The old man sighed. "I made mistakes." "You made more than that," Ethan said sharply. "You lost the company. You lost my father." The words hung heavy. Lena looked between them, sensing an old wound reopening right before her eyes. "Ethan," she began softly. "Maybe this is not the please," he snapped. "Do not speak as if you know my family." Her throat tightened, but she refused to back down. "I know what family should sound like, and this is not it." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The lawyer finally stepped forward, sliding a folder onto the table. "Mr. Carter, we need your signature regarding the transfer of guardianship and assets." Ethan's voice softened as he turned back to his grandfather. "This is for your safety." "The doctors said—" "Doctors say many things," Arthur interrupted. "But I know when my time is near. What matters now is peace, not paperwork." He turned to Lena, eyes gentle. "Thank you, child. You have given me that." The old man's words struck Ethan harder than he expected. He looked at her again, really looked this time, the worn shoes, the tired eyes, the quiet strength. For the first time, doubt replaced suspicion. But before he could speak, Mr. Arthur's hand trembled, his cup slipping and shattering on the floor. "Grandfather!" Ethan lunged forward as Lena rushed to his other side. The room filled with chaos, the lawyers calling for help, rain pounding against the windows, and in the middle of it all, Lena's voice steady but urgent. "He needs a doctor now." Ethan met her eyes, and for one fleeting second, the arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw fear. The storm outside raged louder, as if echoing what neither of them was ready to say. Everything had just changed. The next hours blurred into flashing ambulance lights and the sterile smell of disinfectant. Lena sat in the waiting area of St. Joseph's Hospital, her hands clasped tightly together, the faint echo of sirens still in her ears. Across from her, Ethan stood stiffly by the window, phone in hand, speaking in a low, controlled tone to someone on the other end. "Yes, notify the family office. I want full coverage for his care. No, I do not care about the cost. Just make sure he has the best specialists." His voice softened for a moment as he ended the call, the veneer of authority cracking ever so slightly. The doctor appeared, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Carter is stable for now. It was a mild heart episode, but he will need monitoring and rest. Stress is a factor." Ethan nodded, glancing at Lena. "Can I see him?" she asked quietly. The doctor looked to Ethan, who hesitated, then gave a short nod. "5 minutes," the doctor said before leading her down the hall. The hospital room was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. Mr. Arthur looked smaller somehow, pale against the white sheets. Lena pulled the blanket up around his shoulders and brushed a stray hair from his forehead. "You scared us," she whispered. His eyes fluttered open weakly. "Still here," he murmured, voice rasped, but teasing. "Takes more than that to get rid of me." She smiled, tears stinging the back of her eyes. "Try not to prove it again, okay?" He managed a faint chuckle. "Ethan?" he asked. "He is outside," she said softly. "He has not left since we got here." Arthur's gaze drifted toward the window. "He has my son's stubbornness and his pride." She took his hand gently. "He came back, Mr. Arthur. That means something." "Maybe," he whispered, "or maybe it means guilt finally caught up." The door opened quietly behind her. Ethan stepped in, his face shadowed with exhaustion and something she could not quite read. "You should rest," Lena said to him, standing up. "I can stay with him." "I will stay," Ethan replied simply. His tone was firm but not cold this time. She nodded and moved toward the door, pausing only when Mr. Arthur reached weakly for her hand. "Do not go far, dear," he murmured. "The house will be too quiet without you." She nodded, her throat too tight to speak. Outside, she leaned against the hallway wall, closing her eyes for a moment. She could still hear their muffled voices through the door. Ethan had pulled a chair beside the bed. "Why did you not tell me, grandfather?" he asked quietly. You let me believe you were gone from that life, from us. Arthur sighed. Because I did not want to be found by a name that came with contracts and lawyers. I wanted to be found by something real. Real? Ethan echoed bitterly. You mean by her? Arthur smiled faintly. By kindness. That girl has more decency than half the boardroom you sit with. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face, frustration and guilt twisting together. She is just a stranger. Then why are you still talking about her? The old man asked softly. The silence that followed was heavy and honest. Hours later, Lena dozed off on the bench in the hallway, the hum of fluorescent lights steady above her. She woke to a gentle tap on her shoulder. Ethan stood there, a paper cup of coffee in each hand. You should go home, he said quietly. You have been here all night. So have you, she replied, taking the cup. He sighed. I owe you an apology. She blinked in surprise. For what? For assuming the worst. For thinking you were. Taking advantage. She shook her head. You were protecting him. I get it. No, he said, his voice softer now. I was protecting myself from being wrong. Their eyes met for a moment, something fragile flickering between them. Then the doctor approached again, clearing his throat. Mr. Carter's vitals are improving, but there is another matter. We found signs of chronic stress and old injuries that suggest he has been overexerting himself for months. Someone has been helping him stay independent far longer than he should have. Ethan turned to Lena, realization dawning. You have been doing everything for him, haven't you? She hesitated, then nodded. He did not want to be treated like he was dying. He wanted to live like he still mattered. Ethan's expression softened completely for the first time. Then maybe you are the reason he is still here. Lena looked down, embarrassed. I just did what anyone would. No, Ethan said quietly. You did what family should. The words hung in the quiet corridor, and for the first time, neither of them looked away. 3 days passed before Mr. Arthur was strong enough to return home. The hospital discharge papers were signed by Ethan himself, and the staff smiled politely as he insisted on taking care of the bills. Lena followed them to the car, clutching the small paper bag that held the old man's medication. You really do not have to, she began, but Ethan shook his head firmly. I do, he said. It is my responsibility now. The drive back to Willow Street was quiet except for the soft hum of the tires against the wet road. Mr. Arthur dozed in the back seat. The blanket Lena had knitted tucked around his legs. The town rolled by, the same quiet houses, the same leaning mailboxes, but something in the air felt different now, tenser, like everyone was waiting for something to break. When they reached the yellow house, Ethan got out first and opened the door for his grandfather. Lena helped him up the steps, their movements practiced from months of routine. Inside, everything was exactly as they had left it. The scent of old wood, the ticking clock, the faint shadow of dust motes in the afternoon Sunday. Home, Arthur whispered, sinking into his chair with a sigh. Nothing feels quite like it. Ethan stood near the doorway, taking it all in. You lived here all this time? He murmured. Without telling anyone. You would not have approved, Arthur replied with a faint smile. You would have sent decorators, lawyers, and rules. Maybe I still will, Ethan said, though there was humor in his tone now. Lena set the bag on the table and glanced between them. Would you like tea? She asked, trying to break the heaviness that hung between the two men. Please, Arthur said. Ethan nodded as well. While she boiled the water, she heard them speaking in low tones behind her. You know she stayed by my side every single day, Arthur said. She made me breakfast, kept me company, never asked for a single thing. I know, Ethan said quietly. You were right about her. Do not just say it, Arthur said, eyes sharp, despite his frailty. Mean it, Ethan's voice softened. I do. Lena returned with the tray, pretending not to have heard. Mr. Arthur smiled faintly as she handed him his cup. You are part of this family whether you like it or not, he said. She laughed gently. I think you have enough family already. Ethan looked at her over the rim of his cup. Not the kind that shows up when it matters, he said. The warmth of his tone startled her, but she said nothing. That night, as rain began again outside, Lena stayed late to tidy up the kitchen. She found Ethan sitting by the fireplace, his tie loosened, a stack of papers beside him. Work never ends, huh? She said lightly. He smiled tiredly. You would think running a company would teach me balance. It never does. She hesitated before sitting across from him. The firelight made his face softer, less guarded. "He really means a lot to you," she said. "He raised me after my father died," Ethan replied. "I owe him everything, but somewhere along the way, business became my excuse for not coming back." "He forgave you," she said. "You can see it in the way he looks at you." Ethan looked at her, his gaze steady. "And what about you, Lena? Why do you keep showing up for people who are not your responsibility?" She paused, her hands clasped in her lap. "Because once, I needed someone to show up for me, and nobody did." He nodded slowly, understanding. "You are stronger than most people I know." "No," she said softly, "just more stubborn." They both laughed quietly, and for a moment the distance between their worlds seemed to disappear. The clock ticked softly in the corner. Mr. Arthur's faint snore drifted from the next room. The peace felt fragile but real. Then Ethan's phone buzzed on the table, and the moment cracked. He glanced at the screen, his expression hardening. "It is my legal department," he said. "They found something strange in the records of the estate." "Strange how?" Lena asked. He stood, sliding his jacket back on. "There are inconsistencies, property documents, signatures that do not match. Someone has been moving money through his accounts." She frowned. "Are you saying someone is stealing from him?" "I am saying someone already has," he replied, his eyes narrowing. "And I intend to find out who." As he left the room, the firelight flickered across the old photos on the mantel, and Lena felt a cold unease creep into her chest. For the first time, she wondered if the past they were all trying to heal had darker secrets than anyone realized. By the next morning, the quiet of the yellow house felt heavier. The storm had passed, leaving behind a chill that crept into every corner. Lena arrived early, carrying warm bread and the newspaper. But when she stepped inside, she found Ethan already at the kitchen table, surrounded by files and his open laptop. His sleeves were rolled up, a coffee cup long gone cold beside him. "You did not sleep," she said softly. He looked up, his eyes shadowed from exhaustion. "There is something wrong in his accounts," he said. "Money withdrawn in cash, documents signed with shaky handwriting. I checked the hospital receipts. There are payments made months before his heart episode, to names that do not exist." Lena frowned, her brow furrowing. "But he barely leaves the house. Who could have done it?" Ethan exhaled, leaning back in the chair. "Someone who had access. Someone who knew he would not notice." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. She crossed her arms. "You do not think it was me, do you?" His head snapped up. "No," he said quickly, shaking his head. "Not anymore. I know you better than that." Relief flickered through her, but it was quickly replaced by unease. "Then who?" He rubbed his temples. "There was a caretaker before you, hired through an agency last year. She left suddenly after 3 months. Her name was Dana Lay. I just found her listed on an old invoice." "Do you think she took the money?" "Maybe not alone," he said. "If someone helped her cover the transactions, it could have gone unnoticed for months." Mr. Arthur's voice interrupted them from the living room. "You two sound like detectives," he said weakly, smiling as Lena hurried over to help him sit up. "We are just trying to make sure everything is all right," she said gently. "I have lived long enough to know when secrets start crawling out of the walls," he murmured. "Just promise me one thing, whatever you find. Do not let it destroy what is left." Ethan's expression softened, but there was a flicker of determination in his eyes. "I promise I will make it right." Later that afternoon, while Mr. Arthur rested, Ethan drove into town to meet his accountant. Lena stayed behind to tidy the house, her thoughts restless. She found herself glancing at the old desk near the window, the one cluttered with unopened mail. Something about it caught her attention. The bottom drawer was slightly ajar. She knelt and pulled it open, revealing a stack of letters tied with a faded ribbon. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate, and unfamiliar. The first envelope was addressed to E.C. with no return address. Her heart raced as she unfolded one of the pages. The words inside were chilling. "If you ever speak of what happened with the fund, remember who signed the papers. Silence is safer for all of us." Lena's stomach twisted. She grabbed 2 more letters, skimming through them quickly. Each one hinted at financial dealings, hush agreements, and one line that made her freeze. "The transfer will be finalized once the grandfather passes. Until then, continue as planned." Her hands trembled as she placed the letters back. The sound of tires on gravel outside made her jump. Ethan's car door slammed, and she met him at the door. "You need to see something," she said, her voice shaking. He followed her to the desk, and she handed him the letters. His face hardened as he read them. "This is not just theft," he said grimly. "It is fraud and blackmail." He ran a hand through his hair. "Whoever wrote this had access to our internal systems. These documents mention Carter Holdings accounts. This is bigger than I thought." "What do we do?" she asked. He looked at her, eyes burning with resolve. "We find Dana, and we find out who she was working for." "Mr." Arthur stirred at the sound of their voices, his frail voice cutting through the tension. "Ethan," he said softly, "whatever this is, do not let anger be your guide. I have lost too much to pride already." Ethan knelt beside him, his tone gentle but firm. "I will protect what is ours, grandfather. I promise." As night fell, Lena stood by the window watching him make phone calls, his figure framed by the glow of the fireplace. The man who had once seemed made of steel now carried something else in his eyes, a sense of purpose that was not just about business. When he finally hung up, he looked at her with quiet determination. "I have a lead," he said, "and I will not do this alone." She nodded, her heart pounding. The warmth of the room felt distant as she realized the truth. Their lives were no longer tied by chance or kindness. They were now bound by danger, and by something neither of them had dared to name. The next day began with a gray sky and the restless hum of uncertainty. Lena could feel it the moment she stepped into the kitchen. Ethan was already there, pacing with his phone pressed to his ear. "Yes, track every record tied to the Carter account ending in 127, he said sharply, "and find any contact listed under the name Dana Lay. I want addresses, phone numbers, everything." When he hung up, he looked at Lena with determination in his eyes. "We found her. She is living 2 towns over. I am going there today." "You should not go alone," she said immediately. "This sounds dangerous." "I am not walking into a gunfight," he replied, almost smiling. "Just a conversation." "Even so," she insisted, "you should not do it without someone who knows how to talk to people like her." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "And that would be you?" "Exactly," she said, folding her arms. "I have dealt with more stubborn people than you can imagine, Mr. Carter." He studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "Fine, but you stay behind me if things go bad." "Deal," she said, trying to sound braver than she felt. By afternoon, they were on the road. The drive was quiet, the air tense with unspoken questions. Fields of yellow grass stretched endlessly on either side of the highway. Lena finally broke the silence. "What will you say to her?" "The truth," he said simply. "That I know she stole from him, and I know she was not working alone. And if she denies it, then I will give her a reason not to." The tone in his voice was cold enough to make her shiver. After an hour, they reached a small town where paint peeled from the storefronts, and the streets smelled faintly of oil and rain. They found Dana Lay in a rundown apartment complex, her name scribbled on a mailbox. When she opened the door, she looked nothing like Lena expected: thin, nervous, with shadows under her eyes and a cigarette trembling between her fingers. "Ethan Carter," she said, recognition flickering immediately. "You should not be here." "And yet here I am," he said evenly. "We need to talk about my grandfather." She glanced at Lena, then back at Ethan. "I already told your lawyer everything." "You did not tell him about the money," Ethan said. "Or the letters." Dana's face paled. "I do not know what you are talking about." "You were withdrawing cash under his name months after you quit," Ethan continued. "And you were sending threats to his address to keep him quiet. We have the proof." Her eyes darted toward the hallway. "You do not understand," she whispered. "It was not my idea." "Then whose was it?" Ethan asked. She hesitated, trembling. "Someone from inside Carter Holdings," she said finally. "A man named Paul Reynolds. He said it was just accounting that Mr. Arthur would not even notice. Then he started asking me to sign things. I thought it was harmless until he threatened me." "Threatened you how?" Lena asked softly. Dana's voice broke. "He said if I talked, people would think I was the one who stole everything. He said he had the power to ruin me." Ethan's jaw tightened. "He already did." She nodded miserably. "I was stupid. I took the money once. Then I could not stop. I thought it would end when I left, but then I got those letters too." She looked at Lena desperately. "You have to believe me. I never meant to hurt him." Ethan stepped closer, his voice lower now. "Where is Reynolds?" "Still at Carter Holdings," she whispered. "He handles the charitable accounts. He said the old man's name was useful, that nobody ever questioned donations made under it." Ethan exchanged a glance with Lena. "Then this ends tonight. Be careful, Dana said, her eyes wide. He is not the kind of man you can threaten. Neither am I, Ethan replied. Back in the car, the weight of what they had learned hung between them. Lena stared out the window, her hands twisting in her lap. If what she said is true, then your company has been funding something illegal, she said quietly. Ethan nodded grimly. And I am going to expose it, no matter the cost. That could destroy your reputation, she warned. It could destroy everything. Maybe, he said, glancing at her. But it might also save what actually matters. She looked at him for a long moment. You mean your grandfather? I mean more than that, he said softly. As they drove back toward the city, the evening light bled into gold across the horizon, but neither of them noticed. Ahead of them lay the truth, and with it a storm that would test everything they had left to lose. By the time they reached the city, night had swallowed the skyline, and the glass towers of Carter Holdings glimmered like watchful eyes above them. Ethan parked his car in the underground lot, the echo of the engine fading into tense silence. Lena followed close behind, clutching her bag tighter as they entered the lobby. The receptionist froze when she saw him. Mr. Carter, we were not expecting— Good, he interrupted. Do not tell anyone I am here. They took the private elevator to the top floor, where the lights in the executive wing were still on. Inside, the air smelled of polished wood and expensive silence. Lena had never been in a place like this. Every inch of it gleamed, but it felt colder than the hospital. Ethan's footsteps were quick, deliberate. Paul Reynolds' office, he said under his breath. Third door on the left. When they reached it, the door was slightly ajar. Voices drifted out, one male, low and irritated, one female, hurried and frightened. Ethan pushed the door open just enough to see. Paul Reynolds stood behind his desk, tall and neatly dressed, his tone sharp as he spoke on the phone. No, the transfers will go through tomorrow. The old man does not even know his name is on the papers. By the time the auditors check, it will be too late. The woman beside him, his secretary, looked terrified. Ethan stepped inside, voice calm but cutting. Too late for what exactly, Paul? Reynolds froze, color draining from his face. Ethan, he said smoothly after a beat, forcing a smile. You should have called ahead. I prefer surprises, Ethan replied, closing the door behind him. Especially when my grandfather's name is being used to launder money through charity funds. Paul's smile faltered. That is a serious accusation. Not an accusation, Ethan said, tossing the stack of letters from Dana onto the desk. Evidence. Paul's eyes flicked to the papers, then to Lena. And who is this? Another helper you picked up along the way? Lena held her ground. Someone who actually cares about your victims. His expression turned mocking. How noble. Ethan stepped closer. You used my grandfather's illness, his trust, and his legacy. I could have you arrested in 5 minutes. Paul laughed lightly, but his eyes hardened. You think you can prove it? Half of those documents have your digital signature. If I go down, you go down with me. Ethan's jaw tightened. You forged them. Maybe, Paul said. But who will believe you? The media loves a scandal, and the board loves a reason to replace you. Walk away, Ethan. Be smart. For a long, suffocating moment, nobody moved. Then Ethan spoke, his voice quiet but resolute. I would rather lose everything than live with what you have done. Paul scoffed. You sound just like him, your grandfather. Always chasing some moral high ground. Look where that got him. It got him peace, Ethan said sharply. Something you will never have. Before Paul could reply, security officers appeared at the door. Mr. Carter, one said, we got your message. Do you want him escorted out? Paul's smug expression collapsed. You planned this, he hissed. From the start. Ethan nodded once. You should have known better than to threaten my family. As the guards led Paul away, the secretary whispered a trembling, thank you, before fleeing the room. The silence that followed was deafening. Lena exhaled slowly. Is it over? Ethan turned to her, his voice gentler now. Not yet. There will be audits, board meetings, a mess to clean up, but the worst part is done. She watched him for a moment, the hard edges of his expression softening under the weight of everything that had happened. You did the right thing, she said. Maybe, he replied, but it does not feel like victory. It feels like loss. Sometimes they are the same thing, she whispered. They rode the elevator down in silence, the city lights flickering through the glass. When they reached the street, the air was cool and quiet, a strange peace settling over them. Ethan glanced at her, I do not know what comes next, he admitted. For the company, for me. Maybe start with dinner, she said, smiling faintly. You look like you have not eaten in 2 days. He chuckled softly, the first real laugh she had heard from him. Dinner it is, he said. But as they walked toward the car, Lena noticed something in his eyes, a mix of exhaustion and hope. The war was over, but the healing had just begun. Weeks later, the sun returned to Willow Street, warm and forgiving, melting away the gray that had hung over the yellow house for so long. The garden was alive again, with wildflowers reaching for the light and a soft breeze carrying the smell of fresh bread from Lena's oven. Mr. Arthur sat near the window, his health slowly improving, a wool blanket draped over his knees. Lena placed a tray beside him, tea, honey, and a slice of her newest recipe. You are spoiling me, he said with a chuckle. Consider it payback for all the gray hairs you gave me, she replied, smiling. He reached for her hand, his eyes bright with warmth. You have a good heart, my dear. You remind me that kindness still means something. She squeezed his hand gently. It always does. Outside, a familiar car pulled into the driveway. Ethan stepped out, no longer in the tailored suits he once wore like armor. Today he wore a simple shirt, sleeves rolled up, and a calm smile that reached his eyes. Morning, he said as he stepped inside. Morning, Mr. CEO, Lena teased. Or should I say, former CEO. He laughed softly. Still a CEO, just not the kind who forgets what matters. I resigned from half the board positions, moved most of the charitable funds into independent trusts. We renamed the foundation too. Oh? She asked, arching an eyebrow. What name? The Arthur and Lena Foundation, he said quietly, her breath caught. Ethan, you did not have to. I did, he interrupted gently, because everything I have now, the company, the peace, even this moment, started with what you gave my grandfather. Compassion. She looked at him, words lost in her throat. He was the one who changed you, she managed to say. Ethan shook his head. He reminded me who I could be. You showed me who I should be. The old man cleared his throat from behind them, his eyes twinkling with mischief. If you two are done making my heart race faster than my medication, there is a package on the table. Lena blinked, startled, and walked over. Inside was a small box tied with a ribbon. She opened it to find a framed photo, the three of them together in the garden, sunlight spilling over their faces. Below it, engraved in brass, were the words, "Home is not a place, it is a feeling." Lena's eyes filled with tears. When did you? A week ago, Arthur said. I wanted to make sure we remembered what we built here. Not money, not status, just family. Ethan placed a hand on the back of her chair. He is right, and there is one more thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small wrapped in a handkerchief. When he opened it, the familiar scarf she had knitted months ago was folded neatly inside, but now a silver ring rested on top. You kept it, she whispered. Of course, he said softly. It started this story. I thought it should stay until the end. She stared at him, her heart pounding. Ethan, what are you? He smiled, kneeling slightly. Asking you to stay. Not because I owe you, or because you saved us, but because I do not want another day to pass without you in it. The silence stretched for a heartbeat, broken only by the soft ticking of the clock. Mister, Arthur grinned from his chair. Say yes before my heart gives out for real this time. Lena laughed through her tears. You two never give a girl time to think. Ethan looked at her, eyes steady, voice gentle. Take all the time you need. I will still be here. She took a breath, her fingers trembling as she touched the scarf and the ring. Then you should know, she said softly. I stopped running out of time the day I met you. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand warm against hers. Mister. Arthur clapped once, the sound echoing through the cozy room. About time, he said with a laugh. Outside, the afternoon light spilled through the window, washing everything in gold. Lena leaned into Ethan's shoulder as they watched the old man sip his tea, the photo gleaming beside him. In that moment, the past finally felt at peace, and the future bright, quiet, and full of promise had already begun.